Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to try to do a podcast. It's kind of a podcast where we do some learning along the way of the fitness journey and how to get stronger and what's the best way to get stronger. So, I think what we're going to try to do is we're going to first maybe pull up an article about what we're focusing on. And I think what I want to do is I want to do top down from the human body. So I want to start with the brain, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to do a series of episodes where I'm going to discuss, I guess starting at first would be the brain and how that affects fitness, how we can do better to overall get better. I guess really it's build muscle, how we can build muscle the best, get stronger the fastest. So we're going to go ahead by just opening up Google here. And I don't really know the best way to look up articles other than Google Scholar. So we're just going to do that. So I suggest we maybe look up something having to do with how the brain affects fitness. How the brain affects muscle growth. Let's do that. Okay. All right. See, a lot of different articles here. Effects of motor activity on the brain and muscle development. No. Let's see here. Not really seeing too much right off the bat, being honest. Okay, let's maybe try to look at exercise builds brain health. Key roles. Let's see. Let's click on this one. See if we can get it. Now, I'll be honest, I am really trying to see these for the free, mainly because I don't really feel like paying for a lot of these. So if you guys want to see better material, I suppose I do need donations. Other than that, we're going to find an article that maybe can work with what we're trying to do here. But yeah, let's see. Let's maybe this one. Let's see. So 2003, a little old. But yeah, so the really purpose of what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to learn. And I figured, well, if I'm going to learn, might as well try to learn with you guys, right? So if you guys want to be here for the journey, and maybe we can learn together. I might see. Okay, this might be it. Let's see. The title of this is Contractile and Nutritional Regulation of Human Muscle Growth. Okay. So yeah, let's start with this one. It may not be exactly what I was looking for as far as maybe the head down, but I think it's a good start because I'm skimming this already, and I'm getting protein breakdowns, protein synthesis, amino acids. So maybe we'll have to go a little more in depth. And maybe the next episode I'll try to figure out more, maybe mental health, how's mental health has to do with the brain. But for now, let's do this. Right here is going to be what the article is. So if you want to go ahead and read that, I only got a 20 on my ACT, so I'm not the best reader. So I'm going to go ahead and I don't know, this is kind of new to me, just kind of read this. Point out interesting things, but yeah, just kind of reading it as I go along, and I'll just put the different pages here Here we go. Skeletal muscle comprises about 40% of body weight and contains 50 to 75% of all proteins in the human body. This is the introduction. Therefore, aside from its role in converting chemical energy into mechanical energy for movement and posture, muscle is also essential for regulation of amino acid metabolism, e.g., oxidizing the branched chain amino acids and producing alanine and glutamine as glucosinogenic substrates and fuels for other tissues. Okay. In addition, muscle is a store of energy and nitrogen, which becomes vital for the supply of fuel to the brain and in immune system, and substrate for wound healing during malnutrition, starvation, injury, and disease. Okay, yeah. The mechanisms that regulate the maintenance of the muscle mass are complex, as well as long-term genetic influences. Skeletal muscle can be influenced by a variety of factors, including physical activity, nutrition, primarily amino acids, hormones, insulin, testosterone, growth hormone, stuff like that, cortisol, and disease or trauma. Moreover, the maintenance of body protein mass is critical not only for remaining physically independent, but also, more importantly, for survival. In fact, the loss of approximately 30% of the body proteins resulted in impaired respiration and circulation due to muscle weakness and reduced inflamed function due to the lack of nutrients, eventually resulting in death. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Talking about the proteins in the body and how important they are as in general to the human body. So nothing that we didn't really know already, right? So, okay, let's keep going. The turnover of proteins, which is comprised of simultaneous and energetic process of protein synthesis and protein breakdown, may account for about 20% of resting energy expenditure. In fact, the quantitative estimates suggest that about 1 to 2% of all skeletal muscle is synthesized and broken down daily. Okay. Even though skeletal muscle protein turnover is relatively slow in comparison with other tissues, the mass of skeletal muscle means that it accounts for a large part of the whole body protein turnover. About 30 to 50% depending on the age and dietary conditions. The ability of skeletal muscle to adapt rapidly to physiological variation, such as physical activity of various types, dietary change in quality and quantity, oxidative damage. Must involve modulation of muscle, protein synthesis, and breakdown. Both synthesis and breakdown are controlled by cellular mechanisms that include the activation of gene transcription, initiation of protein synthesis, and several Jesus, I've never seen that word really right there. How do we say that, actually? Let's go back. Let's not be an absolute idiot. Now, I don't know everything, but that word, definitely have not seen that in my life before. What is that word? What is that? How do we? No, I get what it means, but how do we pronounce it? Some of you are probably just like, oh, this idiot, that's how you say it. Proteolytic. All right, cool. Several proteolytic enzyme pathways. As a result of work carried out over the last 20 years, we are now beginning to understand the relative importance of these pathways and how they are regulated in the human skeletal muscle. Okay. I'll be honest, it's the introduction, right? So none of it really makes too much sense yet. Like I said, really, when I'm doing this, I have as much knowledge as hopefully some of you when it comes to learning this, because a lot of people, when they go to the gym, it's, lift weights, put the weight back down. But I've become almost obsessed with the fact of how the muscles work and how can I get better at it. In all actuality, a lot of people will tell you lift this way because I've done it and it's better. Well, that doesn't really work for me. I need an answer. A lot of people say, do it this way, you'll gain more muscle. How does that work, right? Like, not a lot of people, let's say you have a plumber over and they're doing some type of piping. Now, with me, I want to see what they're doing. And if it's something kind of out of the ordinary, I want to know why it's there and I want to know what it does. And I want to know how it works. Mainly so I can, if I ever have to fix that, but that's in more of an actual, like, I can get my hands on. But with the body, don't just tell me I need to do it this way because I said so. I want to know why. Like, why you're telling me this, okay, but why is it better, right? So that's kind of the point here. So I don't know everything. I'm just reading. I don't really know if this is really going to work out. I'm just going to keep this up. This is kind of a thing for me just to learn. So, I mean, if it's liked, if it's liked, if it's not, it's whatever. But, okay, let's keep going. Muscle protein, anabolism. There we go. Muscle protein anabolism occurs whenever a rate of muscle protein synthesis is greater than the rate of muscle protein breakdown. Okay. All right. I remember, a lot of people say stay anabolic. Okay. So, anabolism occurs when the rate of muscle protein synthesis is greater than the rate of Okay. That makes sense, right? Okay. If you're going to break down a bunch of muscle proteins, you want to basically flood your body with, I guess you want your body to produce more protein than is breaking down, right? That makes the most sense. Resulting in the net accretion of muscle protein over time. In healthy adults, muscle proteins are alternatively being synthesized. Net deposition of amino acids or degraded, which can result in net release of amino acids. A state of net synthesis or breakdown depends primarily upon the state of feeding. And when protein intake is adequate, in the absence of other stimulants, there is no net growth or loss. Okay? However, a repeated observation is that resistance exercise can dramatically stimulate the muscle cell hypertrophy. Well, that's really getting popular. I definitely hear that a lot. The word hypertrophy. So, as we can see here, a repeated observation is that the resistance exercise, right? That's really any exercise you're going to do in the gym is resistance is going to stimulate cell hypertrophy. And maybe that's also, hopefully it gets into that, I wonder. Therefore, the focus of this review will be on the mechanisms of how resistance exercise and nutritional provision and the combination of the two results in muscle growth. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. So yeah, we're going to move on to the next part, resistance exercise. Resistance exercise, well, it's really any exercise in the gym, right? Resistance exercise can induce profound muscular hypertrophy, which is responsible for a very variable degree of strength gain. Obviously, hypertrophy or net gain in muscle mass is due to the extended period where protein synthesis has exceeded protein breakdown, right? That makes the most sense. We just said it. If you're synthesizing more protein than you're losing, right, you're going to gain more muscle. It's pretty common, but to hear it as a scientific way, I suppose you could go to the gym and sound smarter, I suppose, unless there's some big muscle head on TRT is going to throw you across the gym for sounding smart. But the time course of hypertrophy is relatively slow, generally taking weeks, months to be apparent. This prolonged time course for hypertrophy may be due to some degree to limited sensitivity of techniques available to measure hypertrophy, but it is primarily a reflection of a slow rate turnover of muscle proteins. So that was a little interesting, that last sentence there, saying that, the prolonged time course may be basically saying we don't know if it's slow because of just how the body works, or have we not found a way to speed it up? Now, having this article be in 2003, it's kind of old. And in the last 21 years, we've definitely, in the last 21 years, we've definitely figured out how to move faster within muscle growth. We've started to put a hit more on hypertrophy, and I think what we're going to do after this is I want to do these videos where I want to read an article, I want to watch something on hypertrophy, and then, or like that's an example, watch something about what we were reading, and then possibly at the, I suppose that's really what I want to do. Read the article, watch something about it, comment, and just wrap it up. Nothing crazy. Learn something new. Let's see. When considered in the absence of other processes, a protein fractional synthetic rate in muscle skeletal as low as 1% D1. Let's see what that means, actually. Let's see if I can find it. I mean, maybe I can't figure it out, but maybe someone watching this video can unstupefy me. Nope, can't figure that out. So it seems to like the power of -1, but I have no idea what that means. And it's not really giving me an example. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of learning, so I don't really know what that means. But anyway, should yield fiber hypertrophy in far less than 8 weeks, assuming an adequate sample size. Of course, what is not taken into account when regarding only muscle protein synthesis is opposing rate of skeletal muscle protein breakdown. Moreover, as has been demonstrated a number of times, the rate of synthesis and breakdown seem to be quite closely linked. In fact, it is the balance between rates of protein synthesis and breakdown that determines net balance and net protein gains, right? Pretty much what we've been saying. This axiom is truly regardless of the underlying mechanisms of hypertrophy. Okay. Resistance exercise is a potent stimulator of muscle protein synthesis. Perhaps more impressive is the long-lasting effect that resistance exercise has on muscle protein. Several studies have attempted to delineate the time course of the resistance exercise-induced increase increase in muscle protein, FSR, which was, what does that stand for again? We just learned that. What was that at? Right here. Okay. Fractional synthetic rate. Okay. The muscle protein fractional synthetic rate, and have reached somewhat different conclusions. The data from these studies have summarized in Figure 2, which shows a single isolated bout of resistance exercise stimulates muscle protein synthesis very rapidly. Okay. Let's read that again. Okay. The data from these studies, which is summarized in Figure 2, okay, we'll see that in a second, which shows that a single isolated bout of resistance exercise stimulates protein synthesis very rapidly. Okay, well that makes sense, right? Rather than doing something compound, if you doing something more isolated, right, we're going to get heavy protein synthesis when just targeting a muscle group. And that's not the easiest thing to do, is when you're in the gym, target one specific group, but if one specific muscle, but if we can target a group of muscles, I think the goal is accomplished. So if we can get, let's keep reading. Moreover, that the stimulation of protein synthesis lasts for at least 24 hours. Okay, interesting. And one study for 48, at which time protein synthesis was still elevated above pre-exercise levels, suggests that the elevation of protein synthesis may last even longer than 48 hours. However, the data in Figure 2 illustrate that there is not a complete concordance over the exact time course. Okay, that's really interesting. It's really interesting that the fact that your muscles your body begins, still is in protein synthesis. well over the time that you lifted. So it's interesting. And this is even longer than 48. So I don't know, if there's new evidence to support that it's over 48 or if it's to debunk that. But if that is what they found, it's interesting to know that even could be up to 2 days later, for that one muscle group you worked 2 days ago is still synthesizing proteins. And I almost wonder, stopping for a second, I almost wonder if that can be a hindrance if you hit a muscle group too soon, right? I almost wonder that if you're still in protein synthesis and you're in whatever group of muscle has not finished that, you pretty much cause it to reset when you decide you want to go lift that again. So let's say you're doing bench and you want to work your chest, or not even bench. Let's say you just want to work chest. If you try to hit chest 2 days later, you could cause a reset in the protein synthesis. Is that how that works, or is it more, does it stack, right? I'm not too sure, but I do wonder if that is what they're talking about here. Let's keep reading. However, the data in Figure 2 illustrate that there is not a complete concordance over the exact time course. The results from the data of McDougall, or whatever that says, indicate that 24 hours after a bout of resistance exercise, muscle, keep forgetting what's it, fractional synthetic rate was still 109% above the baseline. Where at 4 hours, let's read that again. The results of the data of indicate that 24 hours after a bout of resistance exercise, the muscle FSR, fractional synthetic rate, was still 109% above baseline. Whereas 4 hours, the increase was only 50% above baseline. By adding a third group of subjects, the authors concluded that by 36 hours post-exercise, muscle protein, fractional synthetic rate, had returned to baseline. Okay, so it seems to be right at 24 hours is where the fractional synthetic rate is the highest. Okay, so I understood that, but I really wonder what we could do with that information. Okay. However, the subjects in this study were trained resistance athletes, and different groups of subjects were studied at the time point post-exercise to construct the overall time course. Okay. From the perspective of how training affects muscle protein synthesis, as will be discussed subsequently, training substantially, there's a lot of big words coming up here, attenuates, I think I'm saying that right, the response of muscle protein synthesis. In contrast, Phillips studied untrained subjects and used repeated measures designed which may have explained the difference in time course and fractional synthetic rate than that observed by McDougall. Hence, the difference between the time course of protein synthesis after an isolated bout of resistance exercise reported by McDougall and that reported by Phillips may be due to training status of the subjects. Okay, so let's see this figure here. Okay, figure 2. Time course of elevation and muscle protein synthesis after an isolated bout of resistance significantly. So we already know that Phillips was using untrained subjects. And why that's important is because they may not know exactly that thing you probably hear is muscle-mind connection. So they may not have got the best workout due because they don't really know what they're doing. Versus McDougall seemed to use experienced athletes who knew what they're doing and could probably have a better mind muscle connection. So we have time post exercise to 48, and on this axis we got increase. What does that say? Phase base and percentage increase. Okay. So which one's okay? We do see that Phillips hit 109% pretty quickly. That was way before the McDougall. Now, I do wonder if maybe that's what they were talking about, where, yeah, which may have explained the difference in time course. Yeah. So I do wonder if that in the Phillips trial, the people that weren't trained just kind of got a little more exhausted, right? They didn't know what they were doing, and they, with not really training a muscle, you probably had it start from almost zero to strength, right? So you go from like never lifting to lifting kind of hard. I'm going to assume it's going to be pretty taxing, and that FSR is probably going to be higher, maybe right off the bat. Maybe that's probably is what I'm seeing here. Whereas you could see Phillips here, we have the 109 is 24 hours. Okay, fractional synthetic rate of, let's go back, of muscle, protein fractional synthetic rate. So I think maybe that's maybe a little bit of why they kind of call it newbie gains, right? Maybe that's really what they're getting at, where, you hear that newbie gains. I think that fractional synthetic rate has something to do with that. Whereas if you were a person who never really had resistance training and you all of a sudden started, you're going to get crazy results, because you're going to hit that FSR you're going to hit that FSR in a smaller time. And we even see here from the figure here, it also seems like it lasts longer too. It still stays relatively close to 40% or 50% at 48 hours. And then we can see here with the Phillips, and that may explain people who've been lifting for several years why it starts to get harder, because you're, fractional synthetic rate, protein fractional synthetic rate, you're just too accustomed to, hypertrophy. So you're going to hit that right about 24 hours, which is interesting. But you do drop right off. Like you drop right off the face. I'm going to assume it's going to hit, I don't know if it does hit zero. I don't know if that's ever really a number, but you're damn near close after 36 hours. So your muscles are pretty much done with synthesizing. I suppose maybe that's what that means, right at 36 if you're experienced at this. So that's kind of a shame, but that's how the body works. All right, let's keep going. Until the appearance of recent studies, the increase of mixed muscle protein synthesis observed after resistance exercise could not conclude. Oh, I got to read better. Observed after resistance exercise could not conclusively be established as a result of an increase in myofibrillar. What does it say? Myofibrillar. Myofibrillar protein synthesis. Okay. What is this? Let's look this up real quick. Myofibrillar. I think I'm saying that right. Myofibrillar proteins responsible for changes in skeletal muscle mass following resistance training. Okay. Whereas mitochondrial proteins are primarily synthesized in response to endurance temperature. Oh, okay. Interesting. Myofibrillar. Interesting. Okay. Although a resistance exercise increases a myofibrillar protein synthesis that may seem intuitive. Because resistance exercise does not eventually result in hypertrophy, the strength gains as a result of accumulation of force-producing myofibrillar proteins, recent studies have now established that this is in fact the case. These findings clearly establish that the increase in mixed muscle protein synthesis observed after exercise is predominantly due to myofibrillar protein synthesis. Okay, most likely myosin, heavy chain, and actin. Myosin, heavy chain, and actin. Okay. So let's look that up, actually. Let's do a Google search. What does it do? Okay. Myosin heavy chains are ubiquitous actin-based motor proteins that convert the chemical energy derived. Okay. So we're talking about ATP now. Chemical energy derived from hydrolysis of ATP into mechanical force that drives. Okay. So let's stop there. So let's read this back. I got something to say here. So these findings are clearly established that the increased mixed muscle protein synthesis observed after exercise is predominantly due to the myofibrillar proteins, most likely myosin heavy chain actin. So this is interesting. So it's talking about ATP, right? So what I do know about ATP, and that's probably what we'll get into at some point. We'll cover that in something else. But what I do know about ATP is that it's the energy driver for muscles, right? Let's actually look. Let's look. Okay, let's even look. Let's not pull something out of my ass here. Let's see. Okay. So ATP is a source of energy used for storage in the cellular level. Okay. Yeah, energy. Right. Okay. So I do know that. So what I find interesting here is, okay, so we already know the mixed muscle protein is observed after exercise because of myofibrillar proteins, and that is because the myosin heavy chain and actin. Okay. Well, the myosin heavy chain is responsible for the ATP. ATP, we already know, is energy, cellular energy within the cell. And also added that's another reason to take creatine, right? And this is kind of what this whole podcast thing I'm trying to do is about. This is probably something you did not know before, right? And did you care? I don't know. Hopefully you did. That's why you're here. But what is interesting is that what I think I'm reading is when you are low on the ATP, it's kind of, I would imagine, you were talking about chains, kind of like a chain, right? Without the myosin heavy chain, you don't really have what seems that you have a lacking of myofibrillar protein synthesis, and then above that is mixed muscle protein synthesis, would also would be lacking. All at the bottom is having to do with ATP. If we basically are low on that cellular energy, we're going to take creatine because it's going to take the ATP that was converted to ADP, convert it back to ATP, and now we are back into building that muscle. So that's kind of, I suppose that's why creatine is working for you, is because the ATP underlies the myosin heavy chain, which is underlined by the myofibrillar protein synthesis, which is also underlined by the mixed muscle protein synthesis, which means take your creatine, because if you're not, you're literally scientifically losing muscle. Muscle gains, not losing muscle, but you're losing gains that you could be getting because you're stubborn. But that's not me. That's not my place. Anyway, the conclusion gains further weight when one considers the fact that myofibrillar proteins comprise the majority of muscle proteins in muscle, right? Makes sense. If it's majority of the proteins in the muscle and ATP, take your protein. Because if you got very little ATP, we ain't building a lot of muscle here. Okay. Hence, it would be difficult to envision that changes in mixed muscle protein synthesis after resistance exercise would disproportionately stimulate the synthesis of either sarcoplasmic or mitochondrial protein fractions. Okay, that's really good information there. I just kind of realized we might be short on time, which is great. Might just kind of wrap it up here and maybe watch something, kind of know where we're at. But slow reader, if I read too slow, I know I started the video off with just kind of talking. But in the next video, I think what we're going to do is kind of continue. And because either I can make this 2 hours long, but I don't want to do that for editing purposes. So we'll kind of denote where we're at. So what I want to do here is I want to watch a video. See if anyone has a video on this sort of stuff. So what's pretty much what did we learn, right? We learned about hypertrophy. We learned about MMR or MMP. We learned about myosin heavy chains. We learned about how ATP could affect all those different chains. Hypertrophy, time post exercise. Let's see.
Dr. Mike here for Renaissance Periodization. And have you tried our new hypertrophy app? Shameless plug, it exists. Link in the description. But hold on, that video is a different video. This is about BS and the idea that ultra-high protein is a must if you're serious about fitness. How did we get here? How do people have this idea? Well, people find out that protein does a few things. We find out that it builds and retains muscle, which is true. That it suppresses hunger pretty well for how many calories it has, which is also true. And that jacked and fit people eat a lot of it, which is also true. And then all of a sudden, for some of these folks that find this out, they seemingly think they can't get enough protein. Yeah, right?
So this is what we were talking about early in the other study, basically saying that the protein breakdown and protein synthesis, and how it's wise to have protein synthesis larger than the protein breakdown. I'm assuming that eating actual protein has a lot to do with it, right? It just makes sense.
Regular folks eating as much protein as they can. And they say, protein's good, right? Well, yeah, but if you train with weights or exercise, you do not need 3 steaks or whatever. There's all these convenience store, gas station snacks. They're like, no, packed with protein. You're like, packed with fucking primarily protein in there, but it's more than usual, and now it tastes worse. Who is the target demographic for this? It has too many calories from fat to appeal to fit people. They're just appealing to regular people and think protein is some kind of superfood, and it's not. A lot of times, people eat a lot of protein, and in order to keep calorie balance, or just they're too full, they have to cut down on other nutrients like fats and carbs, and those other nutrients help to enhance performance and potentially muscle growth at a certain level higher than protein if you already have enough protein. Tons of bros eat 1.5 grams or 2 grams or 2.5 grams per pound per day to try to get jacked. And guys that are on gear are like, I need extra protein, bro, I'm on gear. No, that's also false. I have a whole video on that, I think. And people will say, look, if I get a bit extra protein, so what? It's a good thing. What's too much of a good thing? You get extra hugs and kisses from your significant other. Who's complaining? Well, here's the reality. Protein has some downsides. One, it costs money, and it's generally the most expensive macronutrient. And if you think you have to eat a lot of it, you could be missing away a lot of money you could spend on other things. Past roughly 0.8 grams per pound of protein per day, only a small minority of users in a small minority of conditions will actually benefit from more than that. So any more than 0.8 grams per pound per day, which is to say if you weigh 200 pounds, you're relatively lean, and you're eating anything more than 160 grams of protein per day, most of the time it'll be pointless. Some of the time there'll be a small benefit up until you get to about 1 gram per pound. Any more than that has no benefits almost at all in any case, except for a tiny, tiny fraction, like you're a natural bodybuilder 2 weeks away from your contest. And then you could go up to about 1.2, 1.25 grams of protein per pound per day while you're starving and eating almost nothing else. And then any more than that for you will still be better spent as far as calories on carbs or fats.
So what he basically said, if it's kind of hard to follow, is he was basically saying how it is. Oh, I think my mic got moved here. Okay, so he was really saying there is when you're looking at how much protein you should intake, it's 1 gram per pound. It's as explanatory as it says, right? 1 gram per how heavy you are. Now, I do know that it really should go off lean muscle mass. He might talk about that, right? I haven't seen this video, but I do know that it is lean muscle mass. Muscle mass is what you really want to go off of. It's kind of hard to know if you haven't been in one of those like underwater chambers where they measure your body fat or however, whatever machine. But a good indication is probably 0.7 grams per pound because unless you already know what body fat percentage you are, you're probably not close to 2%. I know I'm not. I'm probably around 20, 25%. I don't know. I hope I'm around closer to 20. But I would assume I really try to go for, I weigh 320 pounds. I try to go for 0.7, and I think I calculated lean muscle mass if I was like 25% body fat. I think it's like 230, 240 pounds. So I really try to get that kind of protein in. I wouldn't really recommend you get 1 gram per pound, mainly because a lot of it is, you got a lot of fat and other stuff. But it's also not, he's clearly a doctor, right? So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to this. But I do know you want to do 1 gram per pound via lean muscle mass. Kind of hard to figure out. So I always like to go 0.7. That way I know I'm getting my protein. I know I'm getting plenty, but I know I'm just not getting, to the point where, like you said, it doesn't make any sense. Probably doesn't make any sense because, most of us are like 15 to 20% body fat and you're getting 1 gram per pound, but your lean body mass is, right? Like let's say you weigh 250 pounds, you probably got like, what, 200-pound lean body mass or 200, whatever the calculation is. Like it really doesn't make, really kind of pointless. Anyway, let's keep going.
So as soon as you get to about a gram per pound per day, and you want more muscle growth, make sure your training is of high quality, make sure you're eating enough carbohydrates and fats to power performance and support your hormones, and if you need more calories, just turn up the carbs and turn up the fats. You don't have to crank the proteins up anymore. There is no benefit to that, and you will not grow any more muscle. Thinking that you need more than a gram per pound per day to grow muscle is the same thing as pouring so much gasoline into your gas tank that it starts to flood out and goes everywhere, and someone's like, hey buddy, you click that off. Get gasoline everywhere. You're like, oh, don't worry, bro. I like to really, really, really top it off. Because, then my car will go even faster. They're like, oh, you're mentally unwell. I'm so sorry. You shouldn't be getting gas yourself. I'm going to move that away for you. And, wait, hold on. Anyway, I'm done smoking that cigarette. Boom, bam. Why wouldn't I do that? You guys ever think, if you were really cool, you would smoke cigarettes next to a gas station? Joe Camel would do that. Scott, is Joe Camel still allowed to advertise cigarettes to children? Kind of unlibertine world are we living in? Although I will say, anthropomorphic, enormous camel with a leather jacket probably made me less likely to smoke cigarettes than more likely. 1997 was the year America turned away from freedom. Look, I'm not saying cigarette smoking is ultra cool and makes you super attractive. I'm just saying.
All right. Pretty much he goes on into a funny tangent, but that's, that's kind of what we're going over, protein synthesis. Now, it doesn't really add anything to the article we read. Or, I know he's got hypertrophy videos. It's just kind of the first thing I clicked on. There's some other videos, but if I continue this, I'll just do it in those. So yeah, this is pretty much how we're going to do it. We're going to do every episode, we're going to try to read something. Next episode, it'd be a continuation of what we were reading, and watch a video on it. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there. If it's whether we have to watch a workout video, watch animate, we'll find a video somehow. If there is no video for what we're looking at, I guess we'll just wrap it up after we look at the article, talk about it a little bit. But that's kind of it, man. I encourage you to do some research yourself. But other than that, I encourage you to buy some of this merchandise, support me out, shirt and all that. It's it just kind of helps me. Not only, you know what? I should probably tell you what it means. So this is my brand. This is Symbol. Symbol stands for Strongest in My Bloodline. What that means is anybody who is willing to conquer mental and physical obstacles in life is the strongest in their bloodline, right? It doesn't have to do with actual physical strength. It has to do with, are you willing to be the best you can be every day, disregarding the obstacles that are in front of you. This could be from someone who's dealing with a mental illness, right? Maybe not so severe, but they're going through a severe depression for whatever reason, and you're doing what you can to get through that, and you're just pushing, right? You're pushing, and you don't. I promote fitness, right? Because that's a good way to promote mental health and just physical obstacles. But and on the physical side of it, I think that it is great for you on the physical side to conquer mental obstacles, because what's life without trying to always improve, right? And this could be from a person who just got in a car accident and can't use their legs, and now they have to learn how to walk all over again, and they're just never giving up. They're just keep coming, they keep showing up, and they just want to learn how to walk again because something in them tells them they have to keep going. So that's what simple means. Strongest in my bloodline. So if you support that, I support you buying it. That's cool for me. And if you like the content, then you buying it helps me get better articles. I can get a better setup, and maybe we can get people on the show to explain it to us, newbies who don't know too much, in a more of a simplistic way. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.